The sewer wall suddenly began to heave and breathe like a living thing. In the beam of my flashlight, a lifeless slab of concrete cracked open out of nowhere, forming a massive mouth. There was no water inside, only a dry, scorching wind rushing out, accompanied by a grating metallic sound that set my teeth on edge. I tried to back away, but the ground beneath my feet abruptly flipped upward. Concrete crushed my right leg. Both bones in my lower leg snapped instantly. The sound of breaking bones echoed dully beneath my flesh, sickeningly audible. Two rusted steel rebars, attached to a shattered concrete slab, sprang from the pipe wall like a wild boar trap, clamping down viciously on my calf. Locked in place, they ground my bones to pieces. I glanced down at my flashlight. The beam landed on my leg. The rebars were caked in dried, black grime. Then I realized I was being dragged, slowly, steadily, toward the sewer conduit ahead. The opening was widening. Concrete trembled, cracked, and crumbled, raining dust. I clawed desperately at the ground, my ears filled with the grating screech of my fingers scraping against wet concrete. There was no water in the opening. A dry, hot breeze blew against my face, carrying the smell of burnt protein mixed with the stench of sewage and gunpowder residue. My flashlight beam wavered into the opening, revealing pale, squirming flesh, twisted steel pipes, and concrete fragments unnaturally assembled into a massive arthropod-like structure. It didn't sway. It held steady, gaping toward me, while rubble continued to fall around it. The structure remained motionless. One of my teammates shouted something behind me. I couldn't tell if he was calling my call sign or cursing. His M4 fired the first shot. The bullet struck the thing's outer shell, sparking on impact. The sound was dull, like a sledgehammer hitting a concrete wall. I was still being dragged. Spent casings, plastic trash, and gravel scraped noisily beneath me as my body pushed them forward. Another teammate opened fire. I clenched my jaw, swallowing the dry, concrete dust coating my lungs. I took another breath. Behind me, the sound of a rifle slamming against the ground was followed by a desperate curse. Fuck. He said the edges of the opening were moving. He said something was squeezing out from the cracks in the concrete. He said that when a mouth-like orifice opened, it wasn't just wet inside. It had teeth. My mind went blank. I kept clawing at the ground, but I could already feel the dragging accelerating. My elbows were bleeding from scraping against the rough concrete. A teammate pulled me back about half a meter. My leg was still trapped between the rebars, shattered bones grinding inside the muscle. The thing in the pipe wall loosened its grip momentarily, then tightened again, as if testing my weight. The teammate dragging me was Kovacs, the machine gunner. He cursed. My ears were ringing too loudly to make out the words, but I could see sweat pouring down his neck. The dry concrete dust mixed with the smell of something burning, choking me, my throat gritty as if filled with sand. Another teammate, Miller, crouched down and fired 3 armor-piercing rounds into the arm of the clamp, a meter-thick concrete pillar. The first shot chipped away a layer of concrete. The second exposed the rebar inside, and the third struck the rebar, sparking on impact. The pillar shuddered, and the clamp loosened. Kovacs yanked me free. I looked down at my right calf. My combat pants were intact, but my lower leg had turned into a soft, misshapen mess, as if the bones had been replaced by a bag of gravel. The pain caught up with me later. That was 72 hours ago, when we entered the underground network beneath Mosul's old city. The mission briefing said one thing, but the thermal drone footage showed another. The screen displayed people in the underground bunker. A crowd, thermal signatures packed together, all pressed against the wall in identical poses, each person hunched over, head bowed, arms hanging limp, like rows of standing corpses. But the heat signatures were alive. Communications cut out completely 10 minutes into the pipes. The squad leader said to push forward, so we did. The first 3 bunkers were empty. The walls were covered in scratches, gouged from floor to ceiling. 5 parallel grooves, deep enough to fit my thumb. Beside an ammo crate, the receiver of a PCAM machine gun had been flattened, crushed like a stepped-on soda can. The break was smooth, not jagged, as if it had been slowly pressed flat. I ran my finger over the broken edge. It was cold. The air was unnaturally dry, not a drop of water in the sewers. All the wastewater was flowing in one direction, downward to a deeper place. The military dog, Dick, refused to move at first. Its paws dug stubbornly into the ground, claws scraping white marks, and the sound from its nose wasn't a bark, but more like a whimper. The captain caught a scent, one we all could smell, but he was the one who voiced it. He said, "This smells like cement dust." Then he ordered everyone to put on their masks. It was only then that I noticed a strange phenomenon on the surrounding walls. Every 30 meters or so, a rusted steel pipe protruded from the wall, its opening aimed directly at the center of the passage. No water flowed from the pipes, but there was a draft, dry, warm, carrying the scent of cement powder and burnt protein. Dick went berserk, snapped his leash, and bolted back the way we came, disappearing into the darkness in the blink of an eye. At least he escaped. We used directional explosives to blow a hole in the side of one of the pipes. The moment it blew, everything was dust. The flashlight beams revealed nothing. When the dust settled, we entered that space. A massive reservoir, empty of water. The walls were covered with people, militants in combat gear, fixed to the walls with quick-dry cement and scrap rebar, their skin a pale gray, like plaster statues. Their mouths were all stretched open, each one stuffed with a rusted steel pipe identical to the ones we'd seen in the passage. Dozens of cable. Its surface was concrete, embedded with vehicle wreckage and armor plating. The density of the steel mesh prompted someone beside me to mutter, "RPGs can't penetrate this." A steady stream of air blew from the base of the sphere, rhythmically stirring the dust on the ground. No one spoke. Everyone swept their flashlights around. The beams swept across the faces of the people on the walls, all frozen in open-mouthed expressions by the cement. Then Miller's flashlight stopped on one of the human cocoons. He gently tapped my shoulder. Under the beam, the cement shell on that cocoon's chest had cracked, revealing something beneath. Seeking human skin, dry, flattened, pressed tightly against the inner cement surface, with pores still clearly visible. That precast panel had collapsed inward. Without warning, the dead silence under the flashlight beams was torn by a dull thud, like a full bag of cement slamming to the ground. Then the panel on the sphere's surface was gone, revealing a black hole. Fragments still crumbled from the edges. A blast of air shot out from that black cavity, dry and intensely hot, carrying the smell of rust and burnt hair. The next instant, those things shot out. I couldn't count how many. At least 4, maybe 5, each as thick as an arm, coated in concrete, with a pale, writhing mass at the tip. They moved too fast for the flashlights to track, just gray blurs. The nearest one shot straight for Jenkins, our point man, standing at the front. It hit him in the back with a sound like wet cement slapped against a wall. It didn't penetrate. Jenkins was lifted off his feet. His combat boots left the ground. His rifle flew from his hand, hit the wall, and discharged, the bullet striking the ceiling. His body flew sideways, crashing directly into the cluster of cement cocoons on the wall. I saw it clearly. The pale part was a mouth part, ringed with outward curving chitinous hooks, embedding into the Kevlar fibers of his tactical vest, densely, like hundreds of fish hooks latching on a fabric simultaneously. Those hooks were moving, each one writhed independently, digging deeper into the fibers. Jenkins shattered one of the human cocoons. Its chest and abdomen split open, gray-white cement chunks clattering to the ground. Inside the shell were hardened, ash-white cement organs, molded into the shapes of human viscera, shrunken and lifeless. One piece rolled to my feet. I looked down and saw a thin layer of dehydrated skin tissue on the cement surface, complete with pores. I opened fire. Everyone opened fire. The bullet struck the concrete tentacle, exploding into a cloud of gray powder, like hitting a wall with a hammer. The first bullet only chipped away a layer of cement. The second exposed a bundle of rusted rebar inside, and the third ricocheted off the steel with a spark flashing in the darkness. The tentacle didn't stop, continuing to drag Jenkins back. His legs scraped against the ground, the soles of his boots squealing against the concrete. He was screaming, the sound muffled by his mask. Kovacs rushed forward, propping the bipod of his M249 on the chest of a human cocoon and firing a long burst at the middle section of the tentacle. The muzzle flashes came so rapidly they lit up the reservoir like lightning. A section of rebar snapped. The sound that followed was like a steel cable snapping. The tentacle segment went limp, flinging Jenkins into the darkness. We heard him hit something, then the thud of a heavy object hitting the ground. Then the cutting sound started. High frequency, sharp as a dentist's drill, grinding, incessant. Like an industrial cutter slicing through stone. The sound came from where Jenkins had fallen. In the darkness, his flashlight was nowhere to be seen. No light at all. Just that sound, grinding away, cutting deeper, unstoppable. I reloaded. Miller crouched to my left, his rifle aimed upward at the sphere. He shouted something, but I couldn't make it out over the cutting noise. Still, I understood his gesture. He was pointing at the sphere surface. On the tentacles where the cement had been chipped away, the exposed rebar was oozing a sticky, black substance, dripping downward. The tentacles weren't completely severed. The remaining ones retracted, hovering at the edge of the opening like fingers gripping the rim, waiting. The steady stream of air from the base of the sphere continued to blow, stirring the wide, gray drag-marked Jenkins left behind, a trail mixed with shattered concrete and spent shell casings. Kovacs' barrel was glowing red. He reached for a spare, cursing under his breath. I could make out. What the hell is this thing? I swept my flashlight over the concrete cocoons on the walls. The beam passed over one gaping mouth after another. Every steel pipe inserted into those mouths began slowly blowing out dust as the cutting sound started. Dry concrete dust. Miller tapped my shoulder. His finger pointed at the black hole in the sphere. The edges of the hole were still moving. The concrete itself was cracking bit by bit. Cracks spread outward from the opening like a spider web, each one shedding powder. The black hole was expanding outward. That concrete slab had originally been sealed from the outside. Now, something from within was pushing it open. The cutting sound stopped. It cut off abruptly. 1 second, the high-pitched screech was drilling into our eardrums. The next, it was gone. The reservoir fell into an eerie silence. My ears were still ringing, a bone-deep tinnitus drowning out my teammates' breathing. The flashlight beam swept slowly through the dust. Kovacs had swapped barrels, his movements uninterrupted. Click-clack, the sound of metal clashing starkly clear in the dead silence. Miller remained crouched, his rifle still aimed at the black hole in the sphere. Then I noticed a change in the hole. The cracks spreading across the sphere's surface were receding. Concrete debris fell away as if something inside had taken a breath. The collapsed fragment of the precast slab, which had been dangling from the edge, now went still. The sphere returned to its perfect oval shape, the surface seamlessly intact. The airflow from the base continued, its rhythm unchanged. Miller turned to look at me. His gas mask hid his face, but his eyes blinked behind the lenses. He spoke, his voice muffled. That was a malfunction, a hydraulic system failure. He speculated that the tentacles might be some kind of industrial cleaning device, like a pipe cleaning robotic arm. It malfunctioned, hydraulic failure. Those are insulation layers, yeah, a field expedient method in war zones. Miller kept his rifle raised, muttering nervously through his mask. I listened. Even as he spoke, he never lowered his weapon. I went to inspect the bullet holes. The rounds had left shallow pits in the sphere's concrete shell, the deepest less than 2 knuckles deep. The surface was chipped, exposing the steel mesh beneath. The armored surface showed not even a hairline crack. Then I examined the human cocoon Jenkins had shattered. Fragments were scattered across the ground. I crouched down. The flashlight beam fell on them. On the cross-section of the concrete shell, a layer of skin clung to the inner surface. Human skin, dry, flattened, and cleanly peeled from the flesh, it adhered tightly to the inner wall of the concrete. The pores were still visible. The fine hairs remained. The surface had slight wrinkles, like paper left in the sun. I gently prodded the fragment with the barrel of my gun. and the skin clung as if it had grown naturally from the concrete shell, seamless and intact. I stood up. Miller was still talking, suggesting it might be some morbid construction technique. I wasn't listening. I walked over to another intact human cocoon and shone my flashlight into the mouth stuffed with a steel pipe. The light penetrated the tube, revealing a wet interior. A layer of transparent mucus, thick and glistening, reflected a pale yellow hue under the beam. The inner wall of the pipe had patterns, spirals running from one end to the other, as if something had repeatedly moved in and out, rubbing against it. The squad leader crouched by the ammunition crate, tracing an evacuation route on the concrete floor with his finger. Suddenly, his finger stopped. I heard him say, "Look at this." He was staring at his personal terminal screen. Everyone's screens lit up simultaneously. There was no signal, but the screens flickered. A uniform waveform pulsed, a green line jumping with a rhythm that grew slower and slower. Our terminals had been synchronized. Kovac set up his machine gun and glanced at his watch. He cursed the times wrong. The digital watch on his wrist was glitching. The second hand advanced, then retreated half a step, then advanced again. The rhythm wasn't like counting time, it was mimicking something. No one spoke. Silence enveloped the reservoir. I heard the friction of my gear straps, the sound of my own breath echoing inside my mask. A dry wind blew steadily from the base of the sphere, and dust drifted slowly in the light. The open-mouthed figures on the concrete walls remained motionless. In the quiet, Miller whispered, "It's moving." I thought he meant the sphere, but as the beam of light shifted, I saw he was pointing at the shattered fragments of the human cocoons on the ground. One piece, near the base of the sphere, was trembling faintly in place, as if vibrations were passing through it from below. The frequency matched the slow, pulsing waveform exactly. The timer on the demolition charges beeped. The squad leader crouched on the ground, clutching the remote detonator. He hadn't pressed it, but the indicator light on the screen lit up on its own. Kovac was the first to react. He kicked his machine gun aside and reached to disarm the explosives. The moment his fingers touched the detonator, the concrete slab at the top of the sphere burst open. The entire top section shot upward like a tank hatch blown off, soaring 3 meters high before crashing back down and gouging a crater in the ground. Dust billowed, obscuring everything. As it settled slightly, we saw it. It rose from within the sphere, segment by segment. Its silhouette resembled a sea louse magnified 1,000 times, but every plate of its exoskeleton was made of concrete. Rough, irregular precast slabs adorned with spray-painted Arabic script, street graffiti, bullet holes, and soot stains. The seams between the plates were joined by steel rods and twisted axles, and as its joints moved, the rods slid within the concrete sockets, emitting a sound like stone grinding against iron. The tips of its limbs were flat, gray-white limestone grinding surfaces, coarse as millstones. Its head was a crushed car, welded shut, with the windshield still intact but filled with rusted wire. From beneath the head extended dozens of hand-like appendages, each pale and slender, clutching a human eyeball between their fingers. The eyeballs rotated independently in the gaps, each looking in a different direction. Once fully emerged, the thing didn't look at us. Its eyeball-clutching hands slowly turned, as if sensing the air. Kovac opened fire. Bracing the machine gun against his shoulder, he unleashed a burst of armor-piercing rounds into its head and chest plates. The impact sounded like hammers striking a wall, dull, repetitive thuds. Gray concrete fragments exploded, revealing a dark, rubbery layer beneath, into which the bullets embedded without penetrating. Kovac cursed and kept firing, the barrel steaming. Miller fired simultaneously, his M4's 3-round burst striking the joints, sending sparks flying from the steel rods. An armor-piercing round chipped away a palm-sized piece of concrete, exposing a pale, translucent membrane in the seam, through which thick fiber bundles could be seen contracting. The thing moved. It didn't charge. Its entire body began to shake, vibrating at a high frequency so rapidly that the hands clutching the eyeballs turned into a blurry gray shadow. Then I heard the sound, a vibration right in the center of my chest, as if someone were striking my ribs like a tuning fork. My own eyeballs started trembling uncontrollably. The world bounced up and down in my vision, the flashlight beam wildly flickering between the ceiling and the floor. I couldn't stand steady. Kovacs fell to the ground, his machine gun flying out of his hands, hitting the wall and discharging, the bullets ricocheting off the floor. Miller dropped to his knees, bracing himself with his hands, fingers clawing at the concrete seams. My stomach churned. Vomit surged up, stomach acid pushing up my esophagus, warm and clogging my throat. The air valve of my gas mask was blocked. Breathing instantly felt like inhaling through a wet cloth. I grabbed the edges of the mask, trying to tear it off, but my fingers trembled, refusing to obey. Miller was already on all fours. The exhaust valve of his mask sprayed brownish-yellow droplets everywhere. Kovacs was coughing, the sound muffled inside his mask, like a drowning man struggling. The low-frequency vibration continued. The concrete cocoons on the wall cracked on the surface. Fine fissures spread down the plaster-like skin, resembling a dried-up riverbed. The steel pipes stuffed into the mouths of those figures developed new cracks from the inside, one after another. A transparent, sticky fluid seeped from the cracks, glistening under the flashlight beam as it dripped from the pipe openings. I rolled over onto my back. The flashlight fell beside me, its beam landing squarely on the thing's abdomen. Between the plates of its belly armor, pale, worm-like appendages writhed densely, each twitching in sync with the vibration. Then the low-frequency hum stopped. 3 seconds of dead silence. The air was thick with the sour smell of vomit, gunpowder smoke, and gray concrete dust. The hands clutching the eyeballs opened simultaneously. Eyeballs dropped to the ground, rolling everywhere with a clatter. I felt 1 or 2 bounce off my boots. Then a dull thud came from the direction of the culvert entrance, like something collapsing in the distance. Then a second one, closer. The vibrations traveled through the ground, one after another. Harris snapped. He was the youngest in the squad, 24 years old. The moment the infrasound stopped, he was the first to scramble up, the exhaust valve of his gas mask still spraying vomit. He ripped off the mask, his face smeared with tears and cold sweat from sheer agony. He opened his mouth, and I saw him shouting something, but my ears hadn't recovered. I couldn't hear him. He opened his mouth wide in despair, even vomiting stomach acid. Kovacs reached out to grab him. Harris shoved him away with such force that Kovacs slammed into the wall. Harris turned, raised his M4, and aimed the underbarrel grenade launcher directly at the joint in the thing's head armor. He pulled the trigger. The sound of the high-explosive grenade firing was dull, muffled by the ringing in my ears, like someone pounding on a door underwater. The grenade struck precisely above the car windshield. The explosion sent flames and black smoke billowing, the shockwave shaking the cables and steel rods hanging from the ceiling. Several of the concrete cocoons were overturned by the blast, fragments flying everywhere. The flames dissipated. Where the grenade had hit, a palm-wide crack split the concrete armor plate, peeling outward to reveal a layer of black, rubbery flesh beneath, covered in tiny white particles that writhed in the air. The firepower had been completely ineffective. Then I couldn't hear anything. The sound of the grenade exploding in the confined space killed all other noise. The world turned into a silent film. I saw Kovacs shouting, but couldn't hear his curses. I saw the squad leader getting up from the ground, his arm bleeding, his uniform sleeve torn open, but couldn't hear his orders. I saw Harris still roaring, the veins on his neck bulging, firing his rifle on full auto at the thing, the shell casings ejecting in slow motion, one by one, tumbling in the air and bouncing on the ground. I heard nothing. Then the thing detonated a mortar shell. It directly set off the 82mm mortar shell mixed in with the debris on the ground. I didn't hear the explosion, but I saw the light. I saw Miller thrown into the air as if slapped upward by an invisible giant hand. His body slammed against the cast iron pipes on the ceiling, his back hitting first, then the back of his head cracking against the pipe before he fell limply. Another teammate, I didn't even see who, was tossed aside like a rag doll, crashing into the pile of cocoons. The shockwave, carrying concrete fragments and shrapnel, hammered against my body armor like a crowd hitting me with sledgehammers. My back slammed into the ground, my helmet cracking against the concrete, a dull thud resonating in the back of my head. Then everything fell silent. The world of my vision was still swaying. I saw Harris on his knees, his forehead split open, blood streaming into his eyes. He was still firing, shooting into that black void, his ammo nearly spent. The slide had locked back, but he kept pulling the trigger, his index finger twitching again and again, the gun unmoving. I saw the captain struggle to his feet, dragging one arm as he backed away, his mouth moving, repeating a single word. I read his lips. Retreat. Kovac picked up the machine gun from the ground, one leg limp, unable to stand straight. The ringing in my ears faded slightly. Sounds began to seep in, sharp and piercing, like a radio tuning between stations. Then I heard the sound of bones breaking. It came from the direction of the ceiling. Miller and another teammate were still up there, hanging in the pipe shaft. One arm was trapped in a pipe seam at a completely unnatural angle, his body slowly sliding down. His arm, twisted into an extreme position, remained firmly lodged in the seam, emitting a series of grating, teeth-chilling sounds of dislocation. Kovac limped over to me. His mouth moved, word by word, "Boss, what do we do?" I didn't answer. I was looking up at that thing. It shifted. One of its articulated limbs took a step forward. The scrap rebar and concrete slabs covering its joints parted slightly as it moved, revealing a narrow gap. Just for a second or two, but I saw it. That gap exposed its only weak spot, a translucent, pale white tendon membrane, beneath which coiled muscle bundles as thick as cables, contracting violently with its movement. That membrane was its tendon. That spot was where each of its limbs connected to its body. All the external armor had an opening there. No matter how thick the armor, the joints had to expose that soft spot to allow movement. My eyes shifted, moving up from that gap. Above, about 6 meters high, a main cast iron sewage pipe spanned the entire reservoir. Hit by the earlier mortar shell, it already had a crack in the middle, rust-colored water dripping from the fissure, drop by drop, hitting the ground in front of me. The crack was wide enough to fit 2 fingers. The pipe itself, visually over 8 meters long, was made of cast iron, clogged with years of accumulated sludge. It had to weigh more than 2 tons. Rusted steel frames suspended it from the ceiling. For frames, 6 expansion bolts. I looked down back at the joint gap, looked up back at the crack pipe, down, up. My brain was calculating. I screamed frantically at Kovac, "Shoot the pipe supports. Make it fall." Kovac looked at me, just for a breath. Then he turned, propped the machine gun on a pile of concrete rubble, raised the muzzle, and aimed at the ceiling steel frames. He didn't even confirm the plan. Then he fired. Armor-piercing rounds hit the expansion bolts of the steel frames one after another. A continuous stream of armor-piercing bullets tore into the frames, sparks exploding as they sheared off the bolt heads. The steel frames began to sag. The thing took another step forward. All those hand-like sensors that had gripped eyeballs earlier were now fully extended. There were holes in their palms. The holes were spewing dry, hot air, then started moving, like a heavy bulldozer suddenly shifting into full speed. Its entire body crushed everything in its path. The human cocoon shattered, concrete blocks exploded. Kovac kept firing, shell casings pouring from his gun like water from a faucet, clattering to the ground. I wasn't watching. I was fixed on that pipe. The crack was widening. 3 of the 4 bolts had been shot off. For the last one, with his ammo belt nearly empty, Kovac used his final armor-piercing rounds to tear open the bolt's welded end. The steel frame detached from the ceiling. The cast iron pipe began to tilt. Rusty water poured out first, brown red and filled with iron sediment, splashing onto the ground, spattering my boots. The thing charged to within 5 meters of me. The rising concrete limb cast a shadow, engulfing me completely. I smelled that burnt protein odor, thick like charred meat. the limestone grinding surfaces at the end of its limbs aimed directly at my head. The cast iron pipe snapped. All the ceiling anchor points broke away. The 8-meter-long pipe, along with the sludge inside, fell. The thing's head lifted just then. The pipe struck the junction between its head thorax armor and its first abdominal segment. It hit the gap. It hit that pale white tendon membrane. Then I heard the sound of tendons being severed by 2 tons of cast iron. The sound was like a mass of rotten flesh being chopped apart by a giant axe in an instant. Asterisk thwack. SSSSS. Asterisk snapped. The creature's hindquarters convulsed violently. The steel bars connecting the concrete armor plates all tightened simultaneously, emitting a series of sharp, metallic snapping sounds. Then the entire rear structure began to disintegrate from the inside. The armor plates fell off its body one after another, like a landslide, crashing to the ground and leaving deep pits. Beneath them, countless pale, worm-like limbs twitched frantically, each struggling independently, having lost coordination with the body, flailing wildly in the air. Its front half collapsed onto the ground, with all its human hand sensors propping it up, their nails clawing at the concrete as it continued to crawl forward. Its legs are gone. Only the upper half was still moving. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but I stood. Kovac's gun barrel was glowing red. He threw the machine gun aside. Harris remained kneeling on the ground, clutching his empty rifle, his eyes fixed on the creature. The captain leaned against the wall, holding his arm with one hand. He walked over. I approached its head. The human hands protruding from the crushed car shell were still groping the ground. One of the hands loosened its grip, and an eyeball rolled to my feet. The iris was blue. Jenkins had blue eyes. The creature wasn't dead. The cast iron pipe had shattered its hindquarters, scattering concrete armor plates everywhere, while the pale worm-like limbs flailed wildly in the air. But its front half was still moving. All the human hand sensors propped it up, their nails digging into the concrete cracks as it crawled forward. With each movement, the crushed car shell that formed its head scraped against the ground. Its windshield shattered into dust, wires spilling out and dragging along, producing a sharp, metallic screech against the stone. I took a step back. My foot slipped on an eyeball. I crushed it under my heel, embedding it deep into a crack in the concrete. Kovac was reloading the ammunition belt. His fingers trembled, and the belt wouldn't feed properly, the metal clasps clinking against the side of the machine gun. Harris remained kneeling, his empty rifle in hand, his thumb stuck on the trigger, repeatedly pulling it, his eyes fixed ahead, mouth agape. The captain leaned against the wall, one arm hanging limp, the other hand pulling out his last grenade, biting off the pin with his teeth. He threw the grenade to me. I didn't catch it. It landed at my feet, the pin dislodged, the spoon flying off as it rolled on the ground. I dove to grab it and hurled it toward the direction the creature was crawling. The grenade exploded beneath its human hand sensors. The blast tore 3 of the hands off at the root, the severed pale limbs instantly flung into the air by the shock wave, slamming hard against the distant wall. The pale stumps tumbled through the air, spraying transparent mucus, their thick muscle fibers still twitching. The creature paused for a second. Then it continued crawling. It didn't care. Where the hands had been blown off, the remaining sensors opened, their palms facing different directions, as if simultaneously locking onto each of our positions. The pores in their palms began emitting hot air again, dry, carrying the smell of burnt protein, filling the entire reservoir with the stench. Then, beneath the creature's head, a structure we hadn't noticed before opened. Under the crushed car chassis, a horizontal slit appeared. Deep inside the fissure, rows of parallel keratinous blades were exposed, like the blades of an industrial shredder, each vibrating rapidly, grinding against each other, producing the cutting sound. High frequency, sharp, exactly like the sound I heard when Jenkins was dragged away. That sound was closer now, less than 3 meters away. I stuck the flashlight into my mouth, the vibrations rattling between my teeth. I raised the M4, switched the selector to full auto, and emptied an entire magazine into the open slit. 30 rounds. The casings flew past my shoulders, clinking as they landed behind me. The bullets struck the rows of keratinous blades. The first shot cracked one of the blades, sending gray fragments flying. The second shot hit the same blade, shattering it completely. The third shot passed through, penetrating deep into the cavity beyond, with no response. It was like the bullets vanished into nothingness. The remaining 27 rounds struck the blades and the metal chassis, the ricocheting bullets bouncing off the walls, one whizzing past the left side of my helmet with a sharp ding, grazing my ear. I heard a faint sound, like a mosquito's wing brushing against my ear. Magazine's empty. Slide lock back. I hit the release, and the empty mag clatters to the ground. I reach for a fresh one, fingers digging into the mag pouch on my tactical vest. Empty. I feel for a second pouch. Also empty. Third one. Got it. Pull it out. Slap it into the mag well. Kovac's machine gun roars. His belt finally fed. A long, sustained burst. The muzzle flash of the M249 stitching a line of orange-yellow in the darkness, hitting the left side armor seam. Armor-piercing rounds dig into the gap, biting into the pale, tough membrane at the joint. The membrane tears. Thick tendons inside are exposed, shredded directly by the bullets. A loud snap, one tendon whips up, striking a piece of rebar with a sound like a breaking guitar string. The entire left limb of the thing goes limp, dragging on the ground, joint inverted, the limestone grinding surface facing skyward, still futilely opening and closing. Harris suddenly cries out, like someone muffled his mouth and nose from behind. He's still kneeling, but one of the thing's human hands has somehow snaked along the ground and grabbed his ankle. The fingers of the hand tighten one by one, nails digging into the leather of his combat boot, drilling inward. Harris starts kicking, his other foot pushing against the ground, hand scrambling forward, but the strength of the hand drags him back. His body leaves a wide drag mark on the ground, mixed with his earlier vomit and concrete dust. The captain's last grenade flies over, hitting the elbow of the human hand with precision. The arm's segment breaks, releasing Harris's ankle, and twitches on the ground like a fish out of water, fingers still clutching. Kovacs yells, "Left wall." I look. The left wall of the reservoir is cracking. The fissure crawls upward from the ground, passing each concrete cocoon. One by one, the cocoons are torn apart by the crack, the desiccated skin inside seeping out, hanging down along the fissure edges. A section of pipe at the top loosens from the crack, a half-meter thick cast iron pipe crashing down from the wall with rusty water, hitting the reservoir floor, bouncing, and rolling toward us. I roll aside, the pipe scraping past my right side, tearing a layer of fabric from my thigh. Kovacs drags his machine gun back, rolling, the pipe stopping just past his heels. Harris is still on the ground, face buried in his arms. The thing is still crawling forward. Even though its rear half is crushed by the iron pipe, even though its left limb is useless, it's still crawling. It uses its remaining human hand sensors to grip every crack in the concrete, inching forward centimeter by centimeter. The ground is covered in slime trails from its crawl, reflecting the flashlight beam. The crushing blades under its chassis are still spinning, the grinding sound rising in pitch. The sound is getting higher. It's trying to lock onto us. I need fresh ammo. I drop down, scavenging Harris's dropped grenade vest from the rubble and spent casings. There are 2 high explosive rounds left. I strip them out, loading one into my launcher. The other goes into my leg pouch. Then I spot the timed explosive pack. The detonator we kicked into the corner in our panic is still there. The pack Kovacs hadn't finished disarming is still stuck to the sphere's base. I glance back at Kovacs. He's braced with a machine gun, stock to shoulder, firing controlled bursts at the thing's grinding undercarriage. The barrel is smoking, heat shimmer rising from it, scorching the dust in the air. I signal him, 2 fingers pointing at my eyes, then at the explosive pack. He nods. He shifts his fire from the chassis to the area around the explosives, armor-piercing rounds kicking up debris, flipping over a steel plate blocking the pack. I run low. The thing's hand sensors detect me. One suddenly swivels, fingers splayed, a concentrated blast of hot air shooting from the palm orifice, hitting my helmet. The heat penetrates the shell, scalding my scalp. I run blind, reach the explosive pack. The timer is still lit. I grab the detonator from the corner. The batteries still live, indicator green. I stash the detonator in my pocket and start repositioning the pack. Can't detonate it here. Need to place it at the weakest point. I tear open the backpack, taking only the main charge and the detonator. The rest I discard. The seam between the cephalothorax and the torso. That's its only weak spot. I ran to the side of the thing. Kovac's machine gun suddenly stopped for a second, jammed. He cursed, slammed the bolt with his hand, and pried at the stuck casing with his bayonet. The captain got up from the ground, pistol raised in his uninjured hand, firing at the thing's human hand sensors as they turned toward me. The 9mm rounds ricocheted off the concrete shell, but it was enough to divert its attention. Some of the hands swiveled back toward the captain. I looked down and saw an open seam in the armor, the one cracked open earlier by the grenade. The concrete was split, the black flesh beneath still writhing. I shoved the explosive charge inside. The moment I pushed it in, I felt something pushing back, its muscles reflexively expelling foreign objects. I hammered it deeper with my fist, then scrambled away. About 5 meters out, I hit the detonator. The green light flashed red. The charge blew. The sound was trapped inside the concrete box, so muffled it felt like my eardrums were being squeezed from both sides. The shockwave burst from the armor seam, spewing black fragments and chunks of white worm-like tissue. The pieces tumbled through the air, still twitching as they hit the ground. The thing stopped. Its front half had been blown off course, the car-sized chunk of its head carapace finally breaking loose and crashing down, revealing the structure beneath. A mass of human hands, rebar, wires, and the whirling shredder blades, all clustered around a gaping, black-red maw still smoking from the explosion. The blade stopped. The remaining sensors were sucked into the spinning mechanism and instantly shredded. Then it moved. The monster showed no sign of slowing, accelerating toward me with its remaining limbs, crushing everything in its path. Thick mucus sprayed from between its plates as its useless rear half collapsed behind it, chunks of concrete scattering. Its last 3 limbs tensed, launching its entire bulk into the air, at least a meter off the ground, bearing down on me. The shredder blades spun back to life. I pulled the trigger on the grenade launcher. The high explosive round fired at point-blank range, less than 2 meters away, and punched straight into the exposed black-red opening. The blast hurled me backward. My back slammed into the reservoir wall, my skull cracking against a concrete shell encasing one of the human chrysalises. The shell fractured. My helmet took the impact. My vision blacked out for a second, then returned. White. All white. Just dust. I couldn't see. I gasped for air. When the dust settled, the thing's head was gone, completely obliterated from its body. All that remained was a shattered stump of concrete at the neck, pale human hands splayed outward like severed roots, fingers still twitching faintly. The wreckage of the shredder blades lay scattered, the metal coated in pulped white fibers. A few twisted rebars dangled from its chest armor, swaying with the last remnants of its head. The air reeked of gunpowder, burnt protein, and concrete dust. I sat there. Kovacs ran over, dropped his machine gun, and checked my neck and back. His hands were shaking, but he didn't speak. Harris got up slowly, still clutching his empty pistol. The captain slid down against the wall, using his teeth and one hand to tighten the tourniquet. The reservoir fell quiet. Dust still hung in the air. The chrysalises were shattered across the floor. Several of the scattered eyeballs had been crushed underfoot. I looked down at my hand. The detonator was destroyed, just broken plastic. I let the pieces fall. Every sound was sharp, breathing, gears shifting, Kovacs rifling through my med kit beside me. Then I heard something else, from the direction of the intact culvert. Distant but clear. One thud, then another. Heavy, like something deeper inside, moving in the same rhythm, the same steady pace. Coming this way, the purification team had arrived. They descended one by one through the hole we'd blown in the pipe wall, flamethrowers strapped to their backs. The first one stood atop the rubble, helmet light sweeping the reservoir before settling on the shattered concrete plates and a sprawl of pale hands. He didn't speak. The second knelt beside me, checked my right leg, then pulled an inflatable splint from his med kit, strapped it on, tightened it, and pumped. The pressure sent pain shooting from my foot to the base of my skull. I bit down on my flashlight casing. The third man walked toward the culvert. His flamethrower nozzle was wide, aimed straight into the black opening. He pulled the trigger. Thick and white phosphorus fuel jetted out like a stream of white sludge, flooding the tunnel before igniting. The flames burned a sickly white, so bright everything cast long shadows. The stench of burning protein intensified tenfold. The updraft from the heat sucked dust into the air. I refused the stretcher. Leaning on Kovac's shoulder, I hopped out of the reservoir on one leg and made my way back along the path we'd come. With each hop, the splint on my right calf knocked against the ground, broken bone fragments grinding inside the muscle. It hurt, but my mind was crystal clear. Above ground, a bombed-out bus lay in ruins. I sat on its roof, watching as they continued pumping fuel into the culvert opening. Flames roared out, twisting into black pillars of smoke. The air reeked of burning oil and scorched rust. I dictated the combat report. The radio man crouched beside me, scribbling on a notepad braced against his knee. I said only one sentence. Encountered asymmetric, engineering-grade biological threat. Incinerated. The radio man looked up at me. I turned my head away. As we pulled out, the ground trembled lightly, but with a steady rhythm, like something massive taking slow, deliberate steps deep underground. Inside the culvert, the flames still raged, but at the edges of the firelight, I saw the puddles on the ground ripple unnaturally. Droplets of water leapt upward, hanging suspended for a split second before slamming back down, each pulse matching the tremor perfectly. The helicopter's rescue line descended. I was hauled into the cabin. A medic by the door caught me, shoved me into a seat, and started cutting away my pant leg. I looked down. My right calf had swollen into a grotesque purple-black mass, bent at an unnatural angle. The cabin door was halfway closed. I glanced down. Below, every puddle's surface rippled upward in perfect vertical waves. Water defying gravity, leaping skyward. The engines roared to life. The rotor's thunder drowned out everything else. We crossed the Euphrates. I pulled off my boot and pressed my bare foot against the cabin floor. The metal vibrated from the rotors, yes, but beneath that, the thin layer of bone in my soul still trembled faintly, in sync with another rhythm. One beat, then another, a quiet, persistent resonance.